cops were able to see through your walls if you had a hot room. I don't know if there's some genetic, there's got to be genetic going on here. Because my dad used to talk about auto blacking out, some kind of demon voice coming out of him in bar fights and like this. And, you know, like, my dad was a violent dude. I mean, holy. And the violent ass movies that he used to watch. One in particular comes to mind. This, I have to this day no idea what movie this was, but I remember waking up in the back of my dad's car in a drive-thru, and there's a freaking topless woman chained to the ceiling, and some guy's like cutting her boobs off and like frying them and like feeding them to her. I mean, what the was that? Oh yeah, so Jay and I moved in together. We went house searching in Portland in the early 90s. The city was awash in grow rooms because the local police didn't care as much as the feds did. So it was really Wild West time. A real popular method was this 2 kiddie pool method. So you got those little plastic kiddie pools, and you put one on top of the other, and you cut a hole in the top one in the center, and then you kind of weld a hose in there, and then you put a pump on that, and that pump pumps the water from the bottom kiddie pool up to the top kiddie pool and floods the plants. Then you got the plants in that top, and then you got a light above that, right? And the first time I saw that over at D&J's, I was just blown the F away. I just literally could not believe what I was seeing. Like, this was amazing. Jay and I started looking for a house with a basement, because you needed a house with a basement because the cops were able to see through your walls. If you had a hot room, they could totally see it. But they had snitches at the power company, and one time, like, I was followed leaving the grocery store, and I was in a, like, well, you never went to the grocery store with a car that was registered to the house that you were growing in, and you always took a up route and stopped other places first, and, you know, there was a whole procedure to try and not get busted, which I never got busted growing. We were looking for houses with basements, and the house we ended up finding had a big basement. We ended up getting this house, right? 50th and Lincoln, and right, it's right off the Hawthorne district area. Hawthorne was just starting to bloom really at this point. So it's just up and coming. Coffee shops were just opening up. And don't get me wrong, there's tons of businesses that have been there for a while, but like the kind of the hip, really cool artsy things was just kicking off. So we get this house, the whole basement's finished except for one corner. And this was the strangest part of this house. And to this day, I'm not even fully sure what that whole thing was, but down one wall of the basement, there was like, so you had like a foundation in the garage, and then another foundation out, and then there was like a filled up, I guess maybe it could have been backfilled with dirt, and at one time it could have had a complete opening, and it might have been some kind of way to get into the house for something like livestock, maybe who knows. It was very strange. But there was literally this all the way down the side of the house, and then one side of the basement had this double wall, and then the back corner had this, the concrete was poured up like 2 feet, and then beyond that there was wood paneling, and there was a door, and so there was another door, like a height door, that you would figure like, oh, this is where you'd stick your grow room, right? Well, not me. I decided to stick this thing in that, which starts off with digging. So I dug, instead of this 2 kiddie pool method, I dug a pool and found a bathtub. Because the other method, was super easy, and why would I want to do that? I could hide this like up in here and tuck it away and have it going on forever. It was like I set the whole room up with this track light and like one light. And then like in my head, I had some crazy notion that I needed to grow my plants for 3 months. And then I needed to bud them for another 3 months, right? And I was literally just pulling these branches down because I nailed it. Like, this grow room was awesome. It was growing like crazy. And if I actually had known what I was doing, which at that time, I don't know if anybody was doing this sea of green method, but since the sea of green method, where you just grow your plants for a little while and then bud them like when they're little, so you just have a bunch of little buds. This room would have been perfect for that. I would have been rich. The whole life would have been different had I gone that route, because the time, that 6 months that went by, funding everything and slinging weed that whole time, and I was out, and at the time, I mean, literally, like, weed prices were nuts, right? I was getting weed from mainly 2 different sources. Both of those sources were older dudes. One of them I met through D&J, and he was like an old family friend, and his, like, life partner thing, girl, but it was very interesting because this guy had been doing the same thing for 25 years, which was jumping on the back of his motorcycle with a duffel bag full of soil amendments, going out into the woods, finding the right spot, digging a hole, filling up the hole, running irrigation, building fencing. I mean, this guy ran it down to us completely, and we tried it, but we're inept. And this guy was charging us. There was no discount. I was buying 2 pounds twice a week, and he was charging me $4,000 a pound, which I can't remember. I think that's like $300 an ounce. I got this whole theory, basically. It's like, I just gotta have weed all the time, and that way when my crop comes in, I just throw my crop in and make maximum dollar out of the deal. So we start balling. Like, Stoggs is our guy, and I mean, literally our whole thing was built on this 2.8 grams for $40, right? So that's a tenth, right? But everybody thought, or was asking for an eighth. But an eighth literally, if I was selling weed at that rate, I would have been losing money because I was paying $4,000 a pound from this one guy. And this one guy, I mean, this was one of the coolest individuals I've ever got to hang out with. And we used to drive up to his house twice a week and hang out both, because he didn't like this in and out, you know, just buying the weed and running. He was like, you know, you gotta kind of hang out, and that's all right, you know. So the other guy, and I've known this guy too. This other guy, he was selling weed, and it was always wet. This is all fresh. Like literally they had just cut it. And when weed is just cut, it has the look almost of fully dried bomb ass weed. But it goes through the stages. So of course this guy, I mean, this bullshit was always with this dude. And to this day, he's just a scoundrel, right? Never stopped being a scoundrel, you know. And he always has owed me money, and I've always been trying to get my money out of him, and like trying to get him to do work. And I mean, I have just berated this dude about the way he's treated me, and yeah. So anyway, but it, you know, and then my would come in, or D&J was coming in, or Stoggs had a thing growing at one point. And so then we actually rented an apartment to start selling out of. And I had put forth a bunch of criteria to Stoggs, telling him, you know, you have to do this and this and this, and you know, I can't remember all the details by any stretch of the imagination, but I had my together to where I knew what we needed to do to stay one step ahead. And of course, he didn't do what I told him to do, and he got busted. He got somebody raided the apartment. We lost, you know, somebody. And this whole thing pretty much sent everything that we had been working on